Production support for the weekly special is provided by IU School of Public Health Bloomington, addressing public health needs by preventing disease, promoting health, and improving quality of life across the state and around the world through research, teaching, and community engagement. The Al Cobain Recognition Endowment Fund, established by friends and family of Al Cobain to support jazz initiatives on WTIU and WFIU. And WTIU members, thank you.
We are standing on the banks of the Wabash River at Indiana's original city, Vincennes.
And what better place to visit during Indiana's bicentennial year than the place where it all began?
Celebrate history at Grouseland, Indiana Territory's original seat. Honor Hoosier men and women who served the state and nation at the Indiana Military Museum. Get a taste of local history as we visit Charlie's Candy Shop. And laugh along with Indiana's own Red Skelton.
Get to know Vincennes with us. It's all coming up right now on the weekly special. Hi, I'm Erica Sagone.
And I'm Daryl Neer. Erica, Vincennes is such an important city to state and regional history, and this community is just rich with historical treasures to visit.
Exactly, like this, the George Rogers Clark Memorial. It commemorates the old Northwest Territory, and it's the largest national monument outside of Washington, D.C. Vincennes might be a small city, but it is full of history. So let's start by taking a peek into its past.
Thousands of years before the banks of the Wabash beckoned pioneers to the Great Northwest, the land was home to the earliest known indigenous tribes of the Ohio Valley, the Woodland. Their burial mounds, still evident today, remained undisturbed for nearly 1,000 years before the first Europeans arrived. By the 1700s, French fur traders settled in the area, drawn by plentiful game and the natural trading highway the Wabash River provided, claiming the land for the French colony of Canada.
The French had been developing the Wabash River as a new route to connect the northern area of Canada with the southern area of Louisiana. And they established a series of forts, beginning with Detroit. And the logical thing then was to build a fort on the lower Wabash River. They chose for this one of the French-Canadian Marine officers, François-Marie Bissot, the Sieur de Vincennes. In 1730, he came down and brought with him a tribe of Piankashaw Indians down into Louisiana and established his fort here.
Known as the Post before being renamed Vincennes in 1735, the fort became the first European settlement in Indiana, home to a number of French-Canadian families who lived in peace alongside the neighboring Piankashaw village. After the Sieur de Vincennes' death in 1736, Louis Saintonge took over command.
He decided to put the town on a more permanent basis by encouraging agriculture. They granted lands, in fact, laid out streets in the town. He also decided to establish a church, the Church of St. Francis Xavier on the Wabash. The priests, of course, then taught school, and so you had education. And Vincennes became on a more permanent basis.
In 1754, the French and Indian War erupted across the territory. With the French defeat, all Canadian lands, including Vincennes, were placed under British rule. But as the American Revolutionary War began in the East, a young man by the name of George Rogers Clark formed a bold plan to capture the former French settlements, thus opening the Mississippi for safe passage and ensuring the Patriots' continued war supplies from New Orleans. On July 4th of 1778, Clark and 150 men began their attack. Though greatly outnumbered, they successfully captured the forts, including Vincennes.
Henry Hamilton, the British Lieutenant Governor of Detroit, received word of this and decided this was not going to stand. He formed an army of his own and headed down the Wabash River, arriving in the vicinity of Vincennes in December of 1778.
The handful of men remaining at Vincennes were no match for Hamilton's army. He recaptured the fort without firing a single shot. But believing that Clark would dare not attack during winter, Hamilton released his army to home. Clark pounced. In February of 1779, he launched a brazen winter expedition. Falsely convinced that Clark had a large army just behind him, Hamilton surrendered. It was the largest land conquest of the Revolutionary War, eventually becoming known as the Northwest Territory in the newly formed United States.
All the western part of the land in 1800 became the Indiana Territory, and Vincennes was selected as the capital city of this Indiana Territory. It was the oldest town in the territory. It was 70 years old by this time, way older than any other community. It was also centrally located. William Henry Harrison, who had been the Secretary of State, was appointed as governor of the new Indiana Territory, arrived out here in January of 1801 to set up the government.
Harrison's arrival ushered in a new intellectual era for Vincennes. In 1801, he established the Jefferson Academy, today known as Vincennes University. He also hired an official printer, creating the territory's first newspaper, the Indiana Gazette. But it was Harrison's efforts outside of town that began to raise tensions. Governor Harrison made treaty after treaty with the surrounding tribes. By the end of the decade, he had ceded nearly 75% of the territory from the Native Americans. In 1810, Shawnee leader Tecumseh met with Governor Harrison to negotiate a land compromise. Harrison refused, and the resulting Battle of Tippecanoe led to the War of 1812. Harrison's victories as commander of the Northwest Army would earn him a gold medal for service and pave the way for his eventual presidency. In Harrison's absence, however, politicians moved the territorial capital from Vincennes to Corydon, and it was in Corydon that legislators drafted Indiana's first state constitution in 1816. Today, 100 miles away, Vincennes remains a testimony not just to the founding of the state, but the founding of the American West.
Vincennes has a proud past. We're very proud of our history. We consider ourselves to be the most historical community in Indiana. We have the beginnings of religion represented by the old cathedral and the old cathedral library. We have our territorial center here, the territorial capital, that's the beginning of government, the Jefferson Academy, the beginning of education. So you get a lot of interpretation and the beginnings of Indiana, and it is from the study of these beginnings that we give some inkling of why Indiana is the way it is.
Understanding that history is so important to getting to know Vincennes and the importance of the state of Indiana. But there's one particular property that we'd like to really focus on, and that's Grouseland. And Grouseland is the home of William Henry Harrison. But joining us is Lisa Ice Jones. She is the executive director of the Grouseland Foundation. And Lisa, when we take a look at Grouseland, it's more than just a home. And how would you characterize what this building represents?
Okay, this building is a representation of a personal investment by William Henry Harrison when he came here, appointed by President John Adams to be the governor of the newly aligned Indiana Territory. He was 27 years of age when he came to Vincennes, which is quite inspirational. The territory here in Vincennes had been acquired through the Treaty of Greenville, so this was American property, and he built this really showy, magnificent piece of architecture because he had to basically claim authority. The Americans were new to the territory, so he had to come here and make the presence of the American government known.
Could you talk a little bit about that construction process and how this home was built and some of the features that are really notable?
I like to point out that Harrison made the personal investment here in the territory. I think it's a sense of community pride for the people here that even over 200 years ago someone saw a reason to make an investment here, spent $20,000 of his own money, but he incorporated in the structure 400,000 bricks locally made here, craftsmen trained here on site. The walls are 4 bricks thick, so if there was any kind of hostile territory goings on, the people could come here and feel protected. And he did have an open door policy to encourage people to come here. And so we say here at Grouseland that we're the birthplace of Hoosier hospitality. We tell people that Harrison was given 2 important jobs to do when he came here to the territory: to attract as many settlers here as he possibly could and obtain as much land for the American government as he could. And he did both of those jobs very well.
And so much of what William Henry Harrison was able to do here at Grouseland in the territory, it served as a springboard for his ability to run for president. As you take a look at William Henry Harrison's tenure, limited tenure as president, some people might dismiss him, but as you've highlighted, there's a much deeper history that has value we need to remember him for.
Right. When visitors come here, we ask them, what do you know about William Henry Harrison? And commonly they say, we know he had the shortest time in office, we know he gave the longest inaugural address, we know he was the first president that died in office, but most people don't realize all of the things that he did some 30 years before, and with the skill set that was required to do all of those kinds of things. You know, we know that he has detractors, we know the Native American side of the story and their supporters isn't as generous to Harrison's reputation, but we feel like here, because he had a large family, because he had a 45-year marriage, because he tried to do things for the common person, because he had that Virginia noblesse oblige mentality of always wanting to serve, we feel like there are some good character references about the man.
Lisa, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Grouseland and William Henry Harrison.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming to Grouseland.
To learn more about Grouseland and William Henry Harrison, visit grouselandfoundation.org.
Thanks again, Lisa. Well, it's clear that Harrison was passionate about serving his country and his community. Now we're going to go down the road to the Indiana Military Museum, dedicated to men and women who felt the same way.
My interest in military history and memorabilia goes all the way back to when I was a child, 5 years old. And my father built drive-in theaters. And this was right after World War II. Guess what? Lots of World War II movies and all sorts of war movies being played. And it just became natural. I became interested in military items, military artifacts, and military history because I saw so many John Wayne movies, I suppose. My dad was not a collector, but he came home one day with a Civil War musket that someone had given. They owed him 20 or 30 bucks and they gave him the musket. And so I remember that, you know, that I took charge of that musket right away. I remember it was much taller than I was at the time. And then followed very shortly thereafter, the next door neighbor, a veteran of World War II, was going out to the trash with things he brought back from the war, a German helmet and a flag and a belt and so forth. And he looked at me and he said, here, you know, that was the beginning of the collection at probably 7 years old. And then to be able to see and touch these same kind of artifacts just brought it all alive. A museum that will allow you to walk up and actually touch a tank or an old vehicle or whatever it might be, that's exciting. So I continued as a young boy to accumulate artifacts from whoever would let me have them. And so through high school I did that, and then in college I continued to do that. And so the collection began to grow and grow, filling my parents' basement. All this time I kept collecting and collecting. I think the big transition was that when I acquired some vehicles and some artillery, the big things, and started popping those in the backyard, it became more serious. Once I started acquiring big things like artillery pieces, and the first thing was a Jeep, and then it was a half-track, and then later on it goes to a tank and something else. People always suggested, well, you know, you really need to put this stuff in a museum so people can really see and appreciate these things. And so ultimately, in 1984, we incorporated the museum into a 501c3 not-for-profit museum corporation and established the museum in that fashion. So then items that the museum accumulated, of course, belonged to the museum. Items that I had previously accumulated, that I continue to donate to the museum, still doing that today. And of course, we operated on volunteer, and we still operate only on total volunteers. We have a core of about 50 or 60 serious volunteers with the museum right now. The way we were expanding, we knew we had to find a new location. So 6 years ago, we began a campaign to raise the funds to purchase the land we're on now, this 14 acres, which is right downtown Vincennes, adjacent to the George Rogers Clark National Park, and gives us lots of room for expansion, and it had some existing buildings. So we're able to expand and have lots of new plans for the future. The events are what we call living history events. The reenactors come in fully equipped. They come up and set their camps up, set their displays up. They'll go into these trenches. People can walk around and see all of these things just as they would have been during World War I or World War II or even the Civil War. And so they're great for everybody. You know, the young and old, they all enjoy this. They put on once a day at least. They put on a mock battle. Plus we may have some World War II veterans who will still get up and tell their stories and interviews. And it's just an exciting weekend when we have these events and the whole family can come out and enjoy. It does bring history alive to the fullest. You know, when you can see something like that, instead of on film or on the page in a book, there it is in real life. And talk to these collectors and these living history people who love to get into this. And it's a real educational process as well. It's gratifying to see the school groups come in, to see young people excited about what they're seeing, and so that they understand what the cost of freedom has been for our country and what men and women in our armed services have had to do to maintain the freedoms we enjoy. And I think that's the goal, the ultimate goal, of course, of what we're doing. And we have a lot of veterans who come in as our docents and meet those school groups and talk to them. And those are fantastic ways in which we can help the young people understand. There has to be new young people. There has to be another generation that picks up where we leave off. And so when you see a young person come in here, and I mean, I've seen boys and girls, you know, 10, 11, 12 years old that know more about this stuff than I did when I was that age. We're achieving a lot by nurturing those people. You know, some people are satisfied with a book or satisfied with a DVD and a movie or whatever, but if a person comes here because they're interested in history and they're just going to be satisfied that, hey, I've seen as good as I can see. This is a package right here they can't beat anywhere else. Go to a museum where you can see the artifacts that were there when something happened. Brings it all to life.
Eric, I love celebrating Indiana history. It's such important stories, but celebrating those local histories, they're equally as important.
Yep, and Charlie's Candy Shop is definitely one of those places. If you want the real flavor of Vincennes, you absolutely have to go here. Let's go inside and check it out. Lorinda, thank you so much for having us at Charlie's. It smells amazing in here. And Charlie's has been here in one way or another since 1952, and it actually has a really sweet backstory. So tell us how Charlie's came to be.
Okay, well, Charlie was the original founder of the store, and they were doing some remodeling here in this home, and the people helping him wouldn't take pay, so they decided to make caramel corn as thank you gifts. And people just started liking it so well, and Laretha actually ran an ad in the newspaper without Charlie's knowledge, and customers started coming. And they used to make it downstairs in the basement, and this floor and upstairs was their home.
You own Charlie's with your husband, as well as your brother and your sister-in-law. What made you guys decide to get into the candy business?
Well, when Laretha was around 80 years old, she knew she couldn't continue, but yet she wanted to carry on the tradition. She did not have any children, and Charlie and Laretha were my grandparents' best friends, so we were around a lot as a child. And when she wanted to sell, she came to us first and asked if we were interested in buying the business.
And what made you say yes?
Well, it is a blessing. It is a great place to work, and again, we wanted to carry the tradition on as well, and I don't know that she would have sold it to anyone else. And it is a positive place. People come in and they're happy, people leave and they're happy, so it's just a win-win situation.
What do you think Charlie and Laretha would think if they walked back in here today?
I think they would be proud of what we've done. I think they would be proud that we've carried on their tradition, their hometown feel, and yet still made it a little bigger than what we had in the past.
Well, it's a wonderful place, and thank you so much for giving us a peek into the history of it, and definitely going to stick around and try some of those chocolates. If you want to find out more information about Charlie's Candy Shop, visit charliescandyshop.com.
Lorinda, thank you so much for what you do. It gave me a great shot of nostalgia being here because it reminds me of that candy shop in my own hometown.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm sure you'll have that same shot of nostalgia as we take a look at Vincennes' own Red Skelton.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the star of of our show, Red Skelton. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
For over 70 years, Red Skelton entertained audiences across America. But what few know is that his career began on the streets of Vincennes. The youngest of 4 boys to a widowed mother, Red Skelton began working at only 8 years old as a newsboy performing for passers-by in a bid to sell papers. It was on one such day, while standing in front of the famed Pantheon Theater, that his performance attracted the attention of a well-dressed gentleman.
And he said a very fancy-dressed man came by and asked if he was going to the show that night. And Red said, no, I can't. I need to sell my papers. So the man gave him $1 and gave him a ticket to the show that night. And when the curtains opened, there he was. The man who had bought his papers was the star that night. Hit the person next to him and said, that's my friend, that's my friend. At intermission, Ed Wynn brought him backstage and he held him up to the big lead-weighted curtains and he peeked through the curtains and he said, looking at that audience, that's what really wanted him to be into show business and to make people laugh.
First in vaudeville and then as an MC for dance marathons, Red traveled the country performing. But it wasn't until he met his first wife and business partner, Edna, that Red's popularity began to grow. Performing together as the Donut Dunkers, the comical couple made their radio premiere in 1937. By 1941, Red had his own radio show. Over the next decade, he would perform for the likes of Franklin D. Roosevelt and appear in over 40 MGM studio films. Yet his passion remained with radio and the birthplace of many of his beloved characters, including the iconic Junior and his legendary phrase, "I doed it." The phrase became such a part of the national lexicon that when General Doolittle conducted the World War II bombing of Tokyo, newspapers across the country declared, "Doolittle doed it." After the end of the war, including Red's own service in the Army Entertainment Corps, the nation finally had the opportunity to see Skelton's characters come to life with the television premiere of The Red Skelton Show on September 30th, 1951.
Red Skelton's TV show, it ran from 1951 to 1971, 20 years. And it was in the variety show format, so it was a series of sketches that would be performed by Red and his guest stars, and those were just the stars of the day. Because it was a topical show, like Saturday Night Live or something that we might see today was the Red Skelton Show. And so as different things were occurring in the country and in the world, Red would reflect on those in a funny way in his Red Skelton Show. I think the thing that stood out most about Red Skelton during his television show was just his love for his country, his love to laughter, and just his kindness. And it was just so much fun for people to watch it, and his patriotism just really shone through. Probably one of Red's most famous patriotic skits was his Pledge of Allegiance, and he credits that to a 4th grade teacher right here in Vincennes, Indiana. Mr. Laszlo, he says, was his name. And during that Pledge of Allegiance, Red recites it, but he describes each word and what it means so that when people say the Pledge of Allegiance, they're not just saying the words, but they're actually feeling the meaning of the pledge. The Pledge of Allegiance was first aired in 1969, which was kind of a tumultuous time in the United States. And I think people could look to Red and go, okay, we are still a great country and we are still proud of where we're from. And I think that's what was important to Red.
And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine.
After the show's cancellation in 1971, Red Skelton returned to the theater, performing for audiences until his death on September 17, 1997, at the age of 84. After his passing, the acting Vincennes University president, Dr. Philip Summers, petitioned to build a theater and museum in honor of Skelton's legacy. In 2006, the Red Skelton Performing Arts Center opened on the Vincennes University campus. 7 years later, on the 100th anniversary of Red's birth, the Red Skelton Museum opened to the public.
The Red Skelton Museum is 3,500 square feet of sheer fun. It is so interactive and just something for every age. But you're not just reading about Red and looking at pictures about Red, you can actually be a part of it. You can listen to his radio shows, you can actually enter sound effects, pantomime on a green screen with Red. And in our character gallery, you'll get to do interactive clown makeup, virtually on your face. The museum's motto is preserving Red's legacy of laughter, and that's what we want to do here because, you know, not everybody today remembers Red Skelton being on television, but his humor is relatable to everyone. The thing about Red Skelton and really preserving his legacy is that he is an example for generations to come of you may come from poor beginnings and really struggle, but you can, through your own perseverance and your own hard work, really go on to be successful and bring joy to so many people all throughout the world.
And if by chance someday you're not feeling well, and you should remember some silly little thing that I've said or done, and it brings back a smile to your face or a chuckle to your heart, then my purpose has been served for my fellow man. May I wish you all continued success, and God bless. Good night. Thank you.
Erica, while Red Skelton made the nation laugh, it's really great that he was able to keep Vincennes at the heart of his humor.
And it was really fun to explore his city, although I get the feeling that we kind of just scratched the surface. Well, thanks for joining us in Vincennes. Have a great night. Production support for the weekly special is provided by IU School of Public Health Bloomington, addressing public health needs by preventing disease, promoting health, and improving quality of life across the state and around the world through research, teaching, and community engagement. The Al Cobain Recognition Endowment Fund, established by friends and family of Al Cobain to support jazz initiatives on WTIU and WFIU. And WTIU members, thank you.